talking about stormwater, and once we're ready to go on the technical side, we will get started. But I think what I'll do is, in order to keep things rolling quickly, I'll just do, I'm going to then introduce our first speaker, and then I'll introduce our speakers as they go. Carrie Barron is a civil engineering graduate of the University of Manitoba with over 29 years of experience in the municipal, water resources, and environmental engineering fields. She is the Drainage and Environmental Manager for the City of Surrey, whose responsibilities include overseeing the function of the natural and man-made drainage systems, floodplain and dike management, plus environmental initiatives. At Surrey, she and her team have incorporated many different green initiatives into developments and city facilities. Please welcome Carrie.
Hi there. So today I'm going to walk you through not everything we do in Surrey, but some of the things we've done in Surrey for stormwater management from more of a development side. So what we'd call our uplands as opposed to our lowlands. So Surrey's quite a diverse area. We have, when you come there, you can see the development kind of in what we call our upland area. Surrey. And then we have our lowland area, which is mainly agricultural-based land use. It's in the Agricultural Land Reserve of BC. And some of our lowland areas is below sea level. So it kind of gives you the idea. I'm not going to be talking about that. Anybody who was at Maggie's yesterday would have, and hearing about our climate change adaptation, would have had some of the things we're doing for our lowlands and the sea level rise. Today we're just going to focus on what we're doing at the tablelands or the uplands where we have the development occurring. Our development is pretty much at the top of the hill. We've been limiting development not to go into the lowlands just because of the floodplain issue. We have a long history in Surrey of stormwater. You have to realize back at the turn of the century or before, farmers reclaimed a lot of the land to farm in our lowland area. So councils in Surrey have always kind of been aware that rainwater and stormwater management has been a big issue. Back in about 1979, they also adopted what was called the natural drainage policy in Surrey, where they agreed they're not going to close in creeks. So since '79, a lot of our systems, when we have runoff from the streets, all go to the creeks. Our creeks, we have 1,500 kilometers of creeks in Surrey, and most of them are fisheries. So we have active salmon runs for a lot of our major river systems. We have spawning grounds throughout the city. So we've had to develop our stormwater management with that in mind. And we're part of the bigger initiative, and the last thing is we're one of the Metro Vancouver communities, obviously. And through Metro Vancouver, we all agreed with our liquid waste management plan that we'd do integrated stormwater management plans for every catchment in our communities. So they call them ISMPs, integrated stormwater management plans, and they go beyond just dealing with flows. They're dealing with a whole host of things, integrating it into your community, into your land use, and how you develop forward. With that, we've also got a lot of supporting bylaws that we've developed here in Surrey to support our stormwater management, to support our environmental. Some may have heard Stephen talk on our biodiversity conservation plan. That's all tied together. There's a reason why I'm manager of drainage and environment, is because we have a drainage utility. And with the drainage utility, I have separate funding. I'm not fighting with fire and police. I've got my own money. And having environment in there, because we use the creeks as part of our storm system, we have money to fund environmental issues. So we've thought it out, we've got it integrated, and it allows us to do a lot more things than maybe other communities can't do. We have things such as, well, the biodiversity conservation strategy. There'll be more announcements on that coming up with the election this year. Natural areas management plans, as our parks has ways they're going to, strategies on how to protect their natural areas. We have sediment and erosion control bylaw. We have enforcement too on it. We have soil deposition bylaws because it's really critical in our floodplains that we don't deposit too much because it's a balancing act. Different policies, our floodplain policy, where we're not allowing development into a floodplain area even if they fill. So you can't redevelop your land to a higher use. What I'm going to go through today, though, is some of the examples. We're not just implementing stormwater management or low-impact development. We're also addressing our developers. We have a significant degree of development. In the 17 years I've worked at Surrey, I've seen the population go from 200,000 to 500,000 in 17 years. We have to keep ahead of it. So Surrey does a lot of initiatives. We do a lot of joint projects between all the departments because we have to stay on top of everything. So, and the developers want answers too. They don't want just, why do I have to do it? So we do a lot of monitoring with it. One of the first ones we actually did was in our East Clayton community. With East Clayton, you know, they had a lot of, it was our first sustainable community. It was all planned in the charrette in about 96, 97, 98 was when we were doing the planning for it. It was going to, you know, put all the low impact development things and community drainage, and we had targets we were going to reach. Our plan to what we got wasn't totally, didn't sink quite a bit, but we got a lot of what we had envisioned we would get in this plan. Some of them you'll see just, in Surrey we've had a bylaw since the 80s. You cannot connect your rainwater leaders. They have to go to splash pads, they have to go to the ground. That's been since the 80s before we even started a lot of this detailed planning. Porous pavements, infiltration. One of the best things we found is topsoil augmentation. Having everybody put just 2 feet or 600 millimeters of topsoil in the land, you would not believe how that slows the water down. Plus you get better trees in your boulevards and everything else, so it has a lot of benefits. So we had targets. We wanted to infiltrate 12 to 25 millimeters of rain, so 95% of our annual rainfall. That was one of the main targets. We've discovered it's not the giant storms that hurt us the most, it's the small storms that ruin the creek, that cause the most damage, the most erosion. The giant storms do cause it too, but it's not as frequent as the small storms. We want to keep the tree canopy, or at least reinitiate the tree canopy, the roof leaders, the topsoil. It says 300. We've been debating and trying between 300 to 600. A lot of times we say 300, or we'll put 600 in, but we know we only get 300. So things like that. Not every developer kind of puts in your numbers, so you kind of shoot high and you'll accept a little less. Exfiltration tanks, detention ponds. We've kind of approached it as a train. People kind of question some of these things, like detention ponds. I know are kind of, everybody's going, you don't need them if you do on lot. Well, I'm going to show you that you're probably still going to need them from our research we've done, and how it's actually gone forward, how we've been studying these areas. And we're not talking just a couple of years on our studies. We're talking, some of this has been since 97, 98. So in East Clayton, we have all kinds of things on the sites. So we have boulevards, swales, we have infiltration galleries, we have, you know, rainwater leaders, topsoil augmentation. Plus, we still have some of the traditional community things, community detention ponds. Detention pond is more than just storing water. It also adds, if you plan it right, it adds to your biodiversity, it adds to your wildlife, it adds to your water quality treatment train. And it also takes a while to establish. So luckily here it grows fast, but you can see 98 and then you see 2011. It's even bushier now. Sometimes we go back to take pictures and you can't find things, but you can find this lake. But just to give you an idea, because one of the issues we found, you'll see, is oxygen in the water. We started doing this, just because we've had a continuous water quality station, flow station, and rainfall station in this catchment before the study even started. So we've been tracking from before we had development here to after. We've been looking at changes in the water qualities, changes in the flows, changes in the invertebrate count. And what we've been finding, like, so benthics was one of the things we were monitoring. And when I had a consultant look at it in 2010, my BIBI number hasn't changed significantly. And I don't know if one number really gives you a good picture of what's happening in your catchment anyways. But when you come down to look at the families, when you come down to look at the species that make up that number and the volumes and the quantities of them, I think that's where the real picture is. You can really see we've gone through a change totally in our species in these streams. Now we haven't, is that going to settle back to what it was before when the development's all finished and we get the better canopies and stuff again? I don't know. We're still monitoring, just so you know. But we have seen a change in our species compositions, even though we haven't seen a change very significantly in the numbers. They've been holding about the same. Our monitoring, we did very specific street level monitoring, and we found that we are capturing, even though we don't have all the suites we had planned originally in East Clayton, we have quite a few, we're still capturing, we're still meeting our targets on the whole picture. Now, I did have a consultant look at, are we meeting it because of any certain BMP that was put in? Like the on-lots, the soil is in the pond, and he looked at all the developments, how they came, how it changed, and there was nothing conclusive at this time. So it's, I think, again, it's a combination of what we put in and how they work together to cover the bigger storms. What we have found, though, since over the last 15 or whatever years, is we have higher base flows. We have higher base flows all year round. We have lower peak flows on even the giant storms. And so, I mean, with the higher base flows, I can get better fisheries populations, I have a better fisheries habitat I'm preserving. Lower peak flows, I don't have the erosion in the creeks downstream, I don't have to deal with them as much. So if nothing else has met those targets, we've had some problems again with the water quality. It's not quite what we want, but will that change over time? Another area of town we've just recently been monitoring is South Newton. Here is where developers say, do you really need a pond? So what we did is we have two areas. One area has just on-lot BMPs. So they have detention tank, infiltration galleries, detention tanks. We have swales. Well, we don't do swales in roads anymore, mainly because how people manage them. We actually put infiltration galleries in our roadways and have things go to them. And then versus one that is more traditional and goes just to a detention pond. And what we've been finding with these is the BMP ones work really good for the small storms, but we're losing it on the big storms. On the big storms, the peaks are almost the same because you've filled the capacity, you filled the storage volume of your BMPs. So we're getting almost identical runoff, but we don't have a downstream facility to shave off and to hold back before it hits the creek. So it kind of, I think, shows you that you kind of need the two in combination. We are getting better base flows long-term on the BMP one. And it just kind of goes through a bit more of the results. Now, just some of our other features, other parts of town. So again, we design for what the area needs, what the soils in the area are. With our Campbell Heights industrial area, we're on gray gravel. So we have requirements that they've got to do so much of infiltration and bioswales on their lots. They've got we have a whole treatment train. We have oil grease interceptors on their lot. Our city systems are perforated. We have storm scepters on our systems. We have stilling kind of areas before it hits the main creeks. Again, this is going right to salmon habitat, right to very good salmon spawning grounds. And here's just a picture of some of the features. So you can see some of the bioswales, some of the stream and everything it goes to. And you can do that. It's quite easy, and it actually makes your industrial area look a little better if you've seen it. One of the things too is for developers, our council is committed. We're trying things on our land first. We're trying things in our own facilities. A lot of times the Parks is going to do a renew. I may give them money from our drainage budget to help them do some of these, to pilot them, and then we can show developers how they work, how they don't, and the cost factors. Because it all comes down to cost in the end. So in Blackheath Spit, one of the things they had to, it was an old gravel pavement area right across the beach. Anybody who's come on the tour today, which is why I'm kind of dressed like this, because I'm kind of hosting the tour, we're going to be going over to Blackheath Spit to talk about more of sea level rise, but you will also see the porous pavement and also the rain gardens there. But when we're designing our infrastructure, let's bring this in, let's showcase how it can be done, let's look at the price points of these so we can show others how to do it. And we can point developers to where it's not just the city telling people to do something, we're doing it too. So the commitment to show others how we're doing it. Robson Park revitalization. Here we have an old neighborhood. This is a 1950s neighborhood. And the park was a 1950s park. It had a playground and stuff. It was pretty sad. And people weren't using it as much. It wasn't designed with all the things we know today. So what we did was, I needed to do some IB drainage, needed some stormwater management of the catchment because I was getting a lot of erosion in the creek that this neighborhood went to. And there was nothing done in the past. It was typical pipes to creek and out to the ocean. So what we did is we worked out with Parks that they let us put our stormwater features on the park, and the equivalent amount of money we would have been to buy separate land, we rebuilt the park for them. So actually it cost less in the long run than it would have been if we had bought separate land. And so we worked it together, we worked it in with the community, and we've got a pretty spectacular project completed. We still have our sports fields and new playgrounds and everything designed with more septhead and you know, safety and all those kind of things, plus more walking trails. And we have a nice natural wetland, water quality, and within the first year we had beavers, ducks, there's a heron in the one picture. They came in before we even had a full forest and everything. That's only been a couple of years on that project. 96th Avenue. When also the other thing we're doing, as we're widening roads, the runoff from the roads. We're making large road projects now treat the runoff. Whether they want to use bioswales, whether they want to use more mechanical devices, doesn't really matter, but we're slowing the water down. We're trying to get it to treat it. This is the pictures you see here are when it was first completed within a year. I took UBC out there recently to show them for their video. They're doing some stormwater management videos. You could hardly even see any of this, which is okay, but it'll grow in. It looks just part of the natural landscape, but we know it's functioning in behind. And that's it.
No, we'll do all the questions at the end unless there is something that's a point of clarification. Somebody did that yesterday and I thought it was really valuable. If there's something that's a point of clarification that she's just presented, feel free to ask that question now, otherwise we'll handle all the questions at the end. No idea how to get rid of what's up down there. Whatever that is preventing us from going. See, it's because of what's this. We can't. All right, it's just been so much fun watching other people struggle and find yourself in this position. Our next presenter is Christine Zimmer, Senior Manager, Water Protection and Restoration for the Credit Valley Conservation Authority. With a team of 21 staff, Christine is responsible for watershed and sub-watershed studies, developing guidance documents, and providing assistance to stakeholders implementing low-impact development practices, in-stream real-time water quality monitoring, and monitoring of stormwater technologies. Prior to starting at the CVC, Christine obtained a master's degree in water resources engineering from the University of Guelph. Christine was part of a research team funded by the Ministry of Environment and International Joint Commission on LID. Christine has also worked for a leading UV manufacturer as the Regional Sales Manager, Project Manager, and International Field Service Manager. Please help me welcome Christine.
Thank you. Well, today I'd like to just share sort of the state of stormwater management in Ontario. First, one of the things that I continually try to stress in talking to our stakeholders is that July 8th was not an anomaly. In fact, in the Greater Toronto Area, we have had 4 extreme events in the last 10 years. So the comment that was made by a presenter from Windsor is quite accurate. These are not anomalies, and to use the word 1 in a 100-year storm can actually be detrimental when you're trying to get people to disconnect because they think, well, I'll be dead by the time the next one happens, and I surely won't be in my house. So these are some of the things that we're starting to learn, is that how we communicate is really is important. And I think if you haven't seen the RBC Canada Water Survey, please do, because I think it will really transform how you communicate to residents, businesses, about the types of techniques that you want to adopt on their property or you want them to adopt on their property. I think one of the failings that we do in engineering is we make our discussions very high level and people don't really understand what's happening in the ground. And that's evident by this picture here, is that almost 60% of Canadians think that municipalities are upgrading their stormwater systems for these extreme events, while the reality is that we have a deficit nationally of 170 billion. That's just for repairs of our old system. That does not include the fact that we have many of our developments were built prior to floodplain management and flood control. So in the GTA area, 60 to 75% of the GTA is built without flood control. That is the reality that I think we need to make sure that we're aware of and that we express so that we can move forward. And again, those estimates do not include the fact that land costs in the GTA are 3 to 4 times that of infrastructure. And if we actually have to build those areas, those 60 to 75% of those GTA or the Greater Toronto Area, Mississauga and Toronto areas to today's standards, if you believe today's standards are correct, is quite extensive. It's $56 billion. And again, integrated in, I think one of the things that we're also as watershed managers looking at is the integration between water, wastewater, and stormwater. And I'll highlight some of that in my presentation. And as it was pointed out, it's not just extreme events that are costing us money. The Great Lakes supports 40% of Canada's economic value, and yet we fail to understand that we need to protect it so that we can maintain that local-based resource that no other country of the United States has. And that there's a cost to beach closures due to phosphorus and algae of up to $1.5 billion a year in the Greater Toronto Area. So where am I talking? I work at Credit Valley Conservation Authority. So we're a watershed jurisdiction that came about after Hurricane Hazel happened in 1954. So for those of you in British Columbia and outside the province, Hurricane Hazel hit. It was a devastation. And people died, and infrastructure. And what that did is it spurred these conservation authorities that are based on a watershed basis, and we do floodplain management. That's how we started. And now we are looking at biodiversity and all of our natural resources with respect to managing that, not just today, but for our future generations. So in our case, ours is 1,000 square kilometers. We're right beside Toronto and Hamilton. And in the headwaters, we have Orangeville. And then all the way down, we have Mississauga. If those of you who are in Ontario probably know Mayor McCallion, she's renowned. She's also one of the top mayors voted one of the top mayors worldwide. So Mississauga story. I'm going to share with you some of our stories because I hope that you can, while you may be in BC or Alberta or Winnipeg, you can understand where I'm coming from, that we're all the same, that we share the same barriers. So Mississauga, 75% was built prior to flood control. They spend over $40 million every 10 years just for one creek in erosion costs. Even if they spent the $1.7 billion to deal with flood control, they would still have to pay that $40 million every 10 years for erosion control because they're not dealing with the excess runoff that comes from urbanization. So when you pave surfaces, you increase the amount of runoff that comes. The other thing that we found from these extreme events is that high-intensity, short-duration storm event, even in the new development areas, can actually bring more dwellings into the floodplain. So obviously that's a huge concern for us. The other issue is that in some of our existing urban areas, especially those older areas, we see a lot of these Mongol homes coming in. So they demolish those 1950s homes, and they put in these homes that are now, 70, 80% impervious cover in the lot. And our building permit did not account for that excess stormwater. So we've actually seen some of these older areas increasing in impervious cover up to 25%. So in fact, when you're issuing those permits, you are assuming more liability, right? Because you haven't dealt with the extra stormwater. So we really need to look at how we do building permits. And again, it's not just flood control. 15% of Mississauga has water quality. We spend up to $500,000 a year on spills. And what's interesting is when the areas of concern for the Great Lakes were identified, Toronto and Mississauga and Hamilton were identified as areas of concern. But Mississauga and Credit Valley was not considered because at that time Mississauga hadn't built up. Well, now we're one of the largest phosphorus contributors to the Lake Ontario. So it sees that it identifies how we need to be looking at these areas that may not be critical areas at the time of the evaluation, but we would certainly be identified as an area of concern now today. Brampton. Brampton is one of the fastest growing municipalities in North America. So it's projected to grow over 200,000 in 20 years. We have seen creeks go increasing impervious cover by 250% in less than 10 years. So you're talking about huge radical changes to the urban landscape. And these are largely in our headwater areas, so it's also impacting how the whole biodiversity and fisheries is. And we have actually an endangered species called red-side days in these areas. What we found is that with our current MOE, Ministry of Environment guidelines that were established in 2003, is that despite meeting those in these new development areas, we are still seeing in-stream flows increasing tenfold, actually I should, in wet weather periods. So 10 times the flows that we had in pre-development. So if you're Mississauga, you're in trouble, right? But also, if you're Brampton, you have erosion and water quality issues. Halton and Orangeville, those are in our headwater areas. Those are groundwater supply areas. And again, when you talk about increasing impervious cover due to urbanization, if we continue to build the way we're building, we pave over these surfaces, right? And then we have increased water taking. So very little ability to recharge those aquifers, but also what happens during those dry extended periods is you have very low base flows. And so we're seeing in our modeling results impacts to base flow of up to 50 to 70%, which is a huge concern for the wastewater treatment plant that's downstream that needs to dilute the wastewater treatment effluent, and for the municipalities downstream who also have similar capacity issues. So one of the things that I would like to draw your attention to is that stormwater needs to be looked at as a resource to help optimize water and wastewater. It is not a waste. So whether you are Mississauga, who has 75% of flood control or 85% of water quality, or Brampton, who is fastly growing, or Orangeville or a groundwater area, you may have different reasons for making change. One of the things that, since, when I graduated with my master's in low impact development, I thought everybody was excited and ecstatic to build low impact development techniques. And I was shocked when people were like, yeah, that's another study that's going to sit on the shelf. And the reason was people said, well, that's too risky. But I would say the definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing and expecting different results. We can no longer continue to do what we're doing and expect different results. The insurance claims that Dan's going to talk about are a reason why we cannot continue to do that. If you think about the fact that these big expenditures, so back to Mississauga, if they use the conventional controls, they can only add an extra 4% of flood control. That's not enough for those other people, right? We have to look at other ways to adopt stormwater control and build resiliency. And I really am a firm believer that we need to tell our stakeholders the truth of what's happening. We need to tell businesses that they need to adopt these techniques to reduce their liability. Because conventional techniques take a lot of money to invest, land expropriation, they take a lot of time. You could be looking at 20 to 30 years to try and build that shortfall, and in that time you could see 3, 4 events. And that's exactly what happened to us in 2009 and 2013. We did not get those large infrastructure stormwater management techniques in the ground in time for the July 8th storm event. So again, treating it where it falls along the path and at the end of the pipe. You'll see on your tables, we have actually put information on our retrofit guides that look at each land use. Again, what we found is that it's great and well and fine and dandy to look at new developments, but if that's only 5% of your urban footprint, it's not going to do enough of a trick. One of the things I think is important to look at is rainfall depth. And so in Ontario, we're looking at the fact that roughly 0 to 25 millimeters are roughly 90% of our storm events. So if you're thinking again of the natural environment, only 10% runs off. And typically you maybe have 5 to 6 events that would produce runoff to the creek. And that's important, because what happens in an urban environment with end-of-pipe controls is you get much more runoff at smaller and frequent storm events. So what we thought was happening We initially thought that LID could only do up to 12 millimeters, but what we're finding from our monitoring is that it actually can do up to 25 millimeters. And I'm going to show you a quick example because I'm running out of time. So this is one of the sites that we talk about with respect to partnering. This site is a road in which it abuts to a school. So we partnered with the City of Mississauga and with the school board to incorporate permeable pavement and bioswales, bioretention planters, into the municipal and public school property to treat all the road runoff. So all the road drainage goes into the permeable lay-by parking spaces and then into the planters. And on July 8th, we had a 100-year storm event. So we had over 105 millimeters fall in less than 2 hours. And we monitored it. And Elm Drive was in the heat in the center of it. And what we found was that despite the fact that it was in tight soils and that it was a retrofit condition and that we never intended it to be for flood control, we were able to reduce the peak flow by 60%. We held the water back that actually entered the municipal system for 40 minutes. So that's an incredible feat, because if you were doing traditional just end of pipe, you'd have instantaneous runoff in your storm sewers. So again, 75% of Mississauga, in particular in this area, has very old infrastructure. And so trying to hold back or reduce the stress on our existing systems is important. It was also able to reduce the volume by 30%. So again, this was a system that was intended just for those frequent storm events, but was able to provide a lot of resilience for existing new developments. For 95 or 90% of all rainfall events, we have no flow entering our storm sewers. So again, talking about erosion and water quality, you have no pollutants, and you're not increasing erosion in your municipal system. And so we're able to actually recreate nature in a highly urbanized area. We have, I've only shared with you one of the sites, but we actually have 12 municipal sites in each of the different land uses. We have 2 new development sites, one built without consideration for storm ponds, and one built solely with low impact development and dry detention. So we'll be monitoring how those go. Our data is being put into the national database, which is based in the United States, and the international database, and we're finding consistent results. So that should be able to provide more resilience or more consensus on how these are performing. Our water level data supports the fact that these are also working in the winter, which is one of the things that people were concerned about. We have a large stakeholder involvement with our monitoring program because we wanted to make sure that with investing over $1 million in monitoring each year, we want to make sure that we build consensus so that we can move forward and implement these not just in our watershed, but Ontario and nationally. And so we have Contrar from UBC, for example, and different stakeholders across Canada that have talked to us about what are their top 17 objectives. And those are exactly what we do to prioritize the sites for monitoring, but also to establish our monitoring. Long-term asset management has become one of the top issues, and so with continued monitoring, that's something that we will be able to address, the life cycle costs and the maintenance. That's all I have.
Does anyone have any specific questions relating to the presentation that you'd like to ask now? We can take questions later. Oh, there is one?
I'm Austin Morris. I just wondered if you were to kind of amplify the message or communicated the other benefits of kind of the social maybe. So we're talking about like Jonathan Copenhagen, they have their messaging kind of really well laid out in terms of we're not just dealing with risk and stormwater, we're doing testing quality of life and stuff like that.
Great question. One of the things that we do definitely as an organization, we look at biodiversity and whatnot. One of the things that was mentioned in the presentation earlier is the traditional approaches to marketing have been logic-based and have been, and because of that, we have largely low uptake rate. We had, even those people that had basement flooding, had maybe 4 or 5 people that actually took the rebate program from the Region of Peel. we have switched our marketing approach. We did a market survey that found that next to their home, people's perception of their landscape is the most important thing because it's their outward appearance. They need to feel good, they need to show off to their neighbors. And so using terms like native plants when people think that's a dandelion is not going to get people to adopt dandelions on their property. And so we have used fusion garden and landscaping and have landscapers meet the designer where we go out and we actually do a landscape design for residents. And we have demonstration sites so that people go, wow, I want that. It's all about wanting. That will change behavior. Creating an engagement in which you elicit the emotion will change behavior. But a logic-based campaign will only work for you because we're 5% of the population. So we have more about our market research on our website, and I would encourage you to do that. So it's a mind shift, and we can probably talk about that later.
Thank you very much. Our final presentation is by Dan Sandik, who's the Manager of Resilient Communities and Research at the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. Dan's work has focused on lot-level urban flood risk reduction in new and existing homes, insurance issues related to property flood losses, climate change adaptation, public hazard and risk perceptions, application of building codes to reduce disaster losses, wildland fire risk reduction, among other subjects. Dan is a graduate of the Geography and Planning programs at the Universities of Guelph, Western Ontario, and Toronto. Please help me welcome Dan.
Well, thanks very much. I'm not sure how many people were here for Paul Kovacs's presentation yesterday. I'm going to talk about a number of the same topics, maybe with a little more technical detail in some cases. This thing slightly, sorry. Just a bit of background on ICLR. We are an insurance industry-related organization. We're also an institute of the University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario. So a lot of our research does relate to insurance-related topics. And over the past few years, we've been focusing quite a bit on urban flood losses. This has been a major driver for home insurance claims in Canada. This graph here is showing a comparison of fire-related claims, structural urban fire claims, compared to water and wind claims over the past few decades. And it's pretty clear the trend is upward for weather-related losses for the home insurance industry in comparison to fire claims. And one of the big factors here is basement flooding. For a number of reasons, a number of them have been talked about here, infrastructure issues, land use planning issues, climate change impacts, et cetera, have led to increasing frequency of basement flood, also homeowner behavior factors. And it's not just the proportion of claims, it's also the cost of claims that's increasing. These numbers are from Aviva Canada, the second largest home insurance company in Canada. In 2013, they estimated about 51% of their home insurance claims were from water. So the majority of their claims are from water. And they're also finding that the average value of claims are increasing. So the average value in 2003 was about $8,000, $9,000. By 2013, it had gone up to over $20,000. And one of the things that insurers are finding is that more people have finished basements are making more claims for finished basements. So there's more materials, but there's also more labor involved in cleaning and refinishing basements after these events. And and at the industry, not going the right way. At the industry level, the Insurance Bureau of Canada in 2012 estimated that about 1.7 billion per year is paid out for water damage. So it's a huge component of insurance payouts and a huge cause of losses for Canadian homeowners. And as I'll explain in a minute, a lot of these losses are not insured, so this is only a partial picture. So to reflect some of the sort of insurance regime issues that we have in Canada, I'm sure everybody heard about the flooding in southern Alberta, even if you're in the US. This is a huge flooding event, the biggest, it seems to be the biggest disaster event in terms of cost in Canadian history. For the insurance industry, losses were $1.7 billion. And the interesting thing here is that homeowners cannot buy flood insurance for riverine flooding in Canada. But still, $1.7 billion. Most of it was commercial losses, and there were still significant property payouts. There was still extreme rainfall-related flooding in the city and in other parts of the city. Another big event this past year, close to $1 billion. Christine mentioned the July 8th event in the Greater Toronto area. $940 million in insured losses. In this case, it was mostly homeowner losses, and it was largely a sewer backup event. So in Canada, homeowners cannot buy insurance coverage for river coastal flooding, but you can buy it for sewer backup. So when we see these large, intense rainfall events resulting in large insurance losses, largely it's related to sewer backup for homes. So what is urban flooding? I'm sure most of you already know, but just to clarify, I'm differentiating urban flooding from coastal and riverine flooding. And there's a number of sort of key differences here. Frequently, these large events are associated with short duration, intense, extreme precipitation events. One of the key differences is that we see these types of events all over urban areas. They're not confined to low-lying river flood hazard areas. And this map here is actually from City Peterborough in 2004, which had an intense rainfall event causing flooding throughout the city. But one of the key things in this map is the green area outlined in black. That's the river flood hazard area. The red dots are where people complained about flooding. Most of it occurred outside of the predefined river flood hazard area. And one of the key sort of management issues with urban flooding is that we don't have a good hazard assessment for all the various factors that cause urban flooding: groundwater risk, infiltration flood risk, stormwater flood risk, and infrastructure flood risk. So this is a big challenge. And as I was sort of mentioning here and there, but there's sort of three main drivers or causes of lot level flooding during these extreme rainfall events. There's this infrastructure-related flooding, sewer backup, which is basically too much water getting into the sewer systems, sanitary sewer systems, and it pushes back into homes. There's also stormwater overland flow flooding, so water directly from rainfall flowing over the surface of urban areas into homes, and then infiltration flooding or groundwater flooding. And it's more the cost. The costs are huge, but there's also many, many other social impacts, environmental impacts associated with urban flooding. There's lots of non-replaceable sentimental items, people's old photo albums, children's clothing, things like that. And we've done surveying of homeowners who are affected by flooding. This is typically their biggest concern, especially if they get insurance payout. They're okay with the replaceable items, but it's the loss of their photo albums that really gets them upset. There's also significant health risks associated with urban flooding, especially sewer backup. You're talking about raw sewage coming into people's homes, waste from hospitals, factories, everything that goes into the sanitary sewer system coming to people's homes. It also facilitates growth of pathogens and mold, dangerous mold in people's homes. And another sort of cost-related factor is the potential impacts on people's insurance coverage, where they might have trouble sort of getting full coverage in the future after making a claim. So this being said, there's lots of things that you can do at the lot level. I'm talking only about the lot level here. Both of the previous speakers talked a lot about municipal level measures, but I talk mostly about the lot level measures. I tend to break these apart into two categories: behavioral measures and physical measures. So there's some pretty simple things that people can do to help manage urban flood risk. You can simply report events to their municipality so that they know that there's a problem, report the type of flooding that they've had so they can know the causes of flooding. They can have a look at their insurance coverage, try to understand what's covered and what's not covered for water damage. They can just simply talk to their municipality about risk reduction measures rather than just going to Home Depot and buying whatever backwater valves on the shelf. They should be talking to the municipality about acceptable measures. Conducting plumbing investigations, making sure you understand the risk factors in your own home before you start spending money on measures. And have proper building code, building inspections done. If you install a backwater valve, make sure that the city comes in and inspects it and it's done properly. And then there's some plumbing maintenance and use issues. This was mentioned in the City of Windsor's presentation recently, just before this session. Pouring fats, oils, and grease down your drain over time can build up in the sewer system and cause problems. So various, they seem to be simple measures that homeowners can participate in. And then we have the physical measures. And I break these apart into two sort of key categories. There's things that homeowners can do to protect their own home, and then things that homeowners can do on their own lots to reduce the amount of water that their home contributes to municipal sanitary and stormwater systems. So in terms of protecting your own home, there's lots of different measures available. These are just example measures. Backwater valves, check valves that you put in your sanitary system to prevent or reduce the risk of sanitary sewage coming back into your home. Sealing cracks in your foundation wall to reduce the risk of infiltration flooding. Making sure you have proper lock rating, etc. Many different options. I won't go through them all in detail. And then there's measures that you can do to reduce the risk of, or the amount of water that your home contributes to the municipal sewer system, which sort of helps your whole community, and it can help reduce sort of the regional level urban flood risk. So we're talking about things like disconnecting your downspouts from sanitary or possibly storm sewer systems, disconnecting your foundation drainage from sanitary sewer systems, making sure your sewer connections are in good shape. If you have root infiltration or cracks, that can contribute quite a bit of water to the municipal system that shouldn't be in there. So these are seemingly pretty straightforward measures to think about and apply at the lot level. But as Christine mentioned, it's difficult to get homeowners to change behavior. And we have done surveying of homeowners who've been affected by flooding in several communities in Canada. And so some of the key findings that we've identified, many people don't report flood events to the municipality. We find that many more people report to their insurer than to their municipality. So there's possibly quite a few people in municipalities that are affected by flooding that they don't know about. And in some cases with uninsured losses, overland flooding, infiltration flooding, there's a good chance that they're not reporting to anybody. So we might not know exactly where these areas are. There's confusion about insurance coverage. It's complicated. Water damage coverage is complicated. We did some surveying a few years ago nationally, and we found that about 70% of people in the country, or homeowners in the country, felt that their home insurance covered overland flooding, which is not the case. And many people don't know whether or not they have sewer backup coverage. 5 minutes, I gotta move along here. Also, frequently low uptake of programs, as again Christine mentioned. There was a program, for example, in Mississauga that offered essentially free backwater valves and sump installations, and their uptake rate was 10%. I think 16 people out of 160 people offered actually took the program. It was free installation of these measures. And there's limited awareness of what's actually in people's homes. Many people don't know the condition of their plumbing, what kind of measures they have in their home. And one of the big factors here, when there's flooding events, people blame the municipality. They say, you fix the problem. Why do I have to change the plumbing in my house? So this is also a big factor. So these sort of limitations in mind, we do have lots of available resources. I'll move through pretty quick here. But we have tons of educational resources on lot level flood risk reduction, all freely available from our website. A good part of these resources were funded through the NRCan RAC program that was mentioned this morning. We're currently working on a program to help municipalities find ways of identifying measures that could be applied in new subdivisions to reduce infiltration inflow risk, so this essentially would cause a sewer backup, so that we don't have to rely on retrofitting and getting homeowners to disconnect things that were connected in the first place. We're looking at things like, simple things like inspection practices, so that the developer doesn't go in and connect the stormwater catch basin into a sanitary line, or that the home builder doesn't connect storm connections into sanitary, things like that. And these measures are available across the country. Looking at construction materials that are less prone to cracking and failure over time. And then looking at quantity issues, the impacts of climate change, factors related to IDF curves, and the relationship of I&I risk reduction with low impact development. This report will be out in 2014, actually being completed by Profit University of Toronto. Another thing that we're working on is a Showcase Homes program. So what we do here is we work with a municipality somewhere in Canada. We identify a home that's had problems in the past, and we conduct all the proper inspections, plumbing inspections, and we identify the appropriate measures that can be applied to that home. And then we seek to sort of publicize these measures through media attention, and then we also invite relevant stakeholders, insurers, municipal officials into the home to see what these measures actually look like when they're installed in a home. We've done quite a few of these homes for a number of different hazards. We're currently, we did a few already for basic flooding in Toronto, Hamilton, and Moncton over the past few years. We're working on one right now in Calgary, and we're actually looking for a home with Credit Valley Conservation that we can sort of look at the integration between the low impact development measures and the basic flood risk reduction measures. Paul mentioned yesterday as well a book we're about to put out on sort of best practices for managing extreme rainfall, looking at things like programs in Quebec City where they had 100% uptake of downspout disconnection, and see how they did it, and see if we can get other municipalities to adopt similar approaches. One last thing we're working on is code submissions. So as I mentioned, it's so hard to get people to install measures after the fact. We need to find ways of integrating these measures into building codes, into new subdivisions, so that we don't have to rely on retrofits, which are often difficult to do. And another big factor here in new development is the cost difference. I'll focus on backwater valves specifically since I don't have much time here, but to retrofit a valve in a home can cost between $500 and $3,500, depending on your home. To install a valve in a new house is $30 to $250. So there's obvious economic advantages for installing these things in new builds. So in conclusion, these are just a few examples of the things we're working on. We're also working on some social marketing with, again, Credit Valley Conservation, trying to adopt the same approaches that have been used for low impact development, move away from the technical, logical approach, a brochure with a picture of a backwater valve. That doesn't catch people's attention. We got to figure out how to make this stuff meaningful to homeowners. We're also doing quite a bit of work with the home building industry and insurers on mitigation risk reduction. One of the things we're working on right now with CGI is accessing insurance data on water-related losses. And actually, ICLR, along with Engineers Canada, is chairing one of the working groups as part of the NRCan application platform. We're looking at a few dozen projects that we're pursuing over the next few years. Again, all of our resources are freely available. We're always looking for municipal partners for research and for application of tools and testing, so feel free to contact us anytime. And with that, thanks very much.
So very kind thank you to all of our speakers. What a great presentation. It's certainly interesting to learn more about stormwater. We are actually running curiously on time, even if we hadn't started 15 minutes late. So we do have time for questions. So if anyone has any questions for any of the presenters, please stand up, give us your name and where you're from, and ask your question.
I'm Angela. I work for the City. I had a question for the panel about disconnecting downspouts, because we're thinking about doing that. We're worried about how do you ensure that you don't flood out your neighbor? Like soil tests, grading, what are some of the indicators?
Surveys has the bylaw since 1984, our zoning bylaw, to not have, nobody's allowed to connect downspouts. And it's block grading, knowing where, in our building next to the house, knowing where the downspouts go and how it relates to block grading. So a lot comes up with buildings.
Well, I know one of the things they did in City of Toronto, they also have a bylaw requiring downspout disconnection lines to their area. They go, the used to be anyway, now it's requiring homes to put without city property. The city used to introduce things that include go on property, assess the property, look at we used to kind of disconnect the aspect. Some used to it was pretty expensive. They had to rewrite an aspect drainage, through a pipe, somewhere in the backyard. So it really depends on the property. water is important. The new development tends to be better in yeah, it's a difficult thing to talk about.
Just to sort of add to that, I would say, so I don't think so much, so we're okay. What we have found, and again, I know the City of Toronto, if you're doing any type of renovation at a permit, you have to make sure that your downspouts are disconnected. The regional appeal. So I don't know if many of you were in some of the presentations yesterday, but in Ontario we have the upper and lower tier municipalities. And upper tier municipalities like regional appeal deal with water and wastewater, and the lower tier like the City of Mississauga and the City of Brampton deal with stormwater. And in the past, the regions or the upper tier municipality didn't think they were impacted by stormwater, right? So that's not part of their mandate. But July 8th, and the 2009 storm with the basement flooding, we had sanitary backup. And so they become much more engaged in the relationship between upper and lower tier municipalities to really improve. And actually, in our case, the region is going to be making it mandatory because of the low uptake rate. What we're doing as part of the credit, again, is trying to be more innovative and create these Meet the Designer nights, where we go out and we look at having a designer, an engineer, and a landscape architect help with the drainage issues, because grading is a huge issue. And actually, in one of the areas we saw people filling up their ditches or regrading, putting, those ugly, where they say, oh, there's swales between the houses, they paved it with their sidewalks, right? So then they're creating all these issues. And so we have to talk to them about, you're causing flooding for your neighbor. You could be liable, right? Talking about the issues. And, a lot of people shy away with talking to the community when we've had an extreme event, because you're afraid of getting yelled at. But in effect, when you start to talk to people, what's happening is, because municipalities tend to be afraid to talk to residents during that time, residents are going to Home Depot and Canadian Tire and Rona asking for information. And unfortunately, what you're going to get is Rona telling you to disconnect your driveway and get the water away from your house, which is not what you want. And so we're looking at market research to educate contractors and the Canadian Tire and Rona. So because you know what, they're going to be more of a face than we are, to be real. And so I think that's going to be critical, is engaging the contractors in those kinds of things. And unfortunately, roof leader disconnects are very low hanging fruit and cost when they're doing roofs, right? And so getting those kinds of contractors out to workshops is very hard, because you need to poke them with something, right? So I think we need to start to be more creative in how we engage different partners in regarding that right now.
I just wanted to add a slightly different perspective to that topic, because I'm from North Vancouver, where we have a lot of steep slopes, which isn't the case for a lot of the discussion. And I know Delta has neighbors. If you talk about not increasing risk to your neighbors, you put your down slope neighbors as well. And in our case, for the large majority, that makes sense, but for the small majority, or the small minority, where we have properties on the crested slopes with residential development at the base, and we have a landslide prone slope in between, we actually want those people to have their meters connected, and that's the message that we're encouraging to those specific properties, and I know that might have a few areas like that.
Anybody else have a question?
Thanks for all the presentations. Dan, in your presentation, you noted that people sometimes report it to the insurance companies, but not to the municipality. That information is valuable. Is there a mechanism or mechanisms in place in different parts of the country where that information could be shared with the municipality? If not, would the lady from San Francisco is talking about ordinances for energy usage for buildings. Is it something that would be of use? Are there bylaws in place that could be put in place maybe to share that, to make that information available to the municipality?
Yeah, well, I mean, public availability of insurance data has always been sort of a discussion subject. We don't freely share this information. We are working with the major sort of insurance data collector right now on access to insurance data on water loss and other losses. But part of the agreement is that we can't share the details of the information. Like we have information on plots in Saga and their insurance claims, but under no circumstances can we cover to municipalities. And the other thing is that, I mean, this is a difficult thing to address. And the other thing is that, it's again a sensitive thing that sometimes homeowners don't report basic flooding because they don't want anybody to know it's basic flooding because they're worried about property values. So we have to find a way, and I think the social marketing stuff is that we're trying to develop to get people to understand the importance of reporting flood losses so that they do it. That it helps them, it helps their neighbors. If they want to see the fix infrastructure, they better report their flooding. But it's still not that straightforward with how maybe some sort of totally anonymous means of reporting losses, reporting flooding, or something like that. Might be an option, but that's something that.
Yeah, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, it's been a really interesting process because, as a conservation authority, we've been working well together, and we like to share information, and we like to learn and grow the bill. But I found some of our municipal partners have been more hesitant, again, because of some of the issues with, if we tell, where our flooding reports were, will that impact people's insurance? But I think one of the issues that we're trying to say with municipalities, if we don't work together, a lot of claims aren't going to be covered. And so the reality is, at some point, if a person's claim isn't going to be, an insurance claim isn't going to be paid out, they are going to go to personality. And, we already have lawsuits right now, class action lawsuits across Ontario with respect to basement flooding. So the reality is we can be proactive or we can be reactive, and working together as a partner is much more beneficial. But it's that level of trust which was talked about in the morning session.
I think, sure, I know being the municipal side now, one of my biggest problems is people not telling us, and so we can't guide our infrastructure or studies to the areas that even if we don't know. I find that people have been in these houses in these old areas a long time. They were built before there was like standards and everything they built in their ditches, and they've had a history of flooding problems. And they don't report at all. They don't come to report to anybody. When you get the new guy moving into that house and the young person, that's when we hear it. But we do have areas of town, so it would be nice to know ones that are applicable, not ones that their foundation drains don't work or anything. But we do already have an idea in some of our older areas what's there and why we're not getting complaints. Mainly because it's the old people who live there 50 years. It's the new ones, when they come in, we really start hearing it. But it's something you can't fix overnight, too. We'll tell them, oh, we have this in our 10-year plan with this. But it's, again, it's fixing these problems.
Well, the issue is, if it's going to take you 10 years, you could have another 4 events. And so, there was a question initially was asked about how do we engage people. That is exactly the message I'm giving businesses. If your business is closed, if your parking lot was flooded, and guess what? If the tax plan isn't going to be to fix your area for 10 years, you could have another 4 of those events. Your competition should be open during those flood events to give the backup power to the residents that lost their power. So, do you want to build resiliency or not? I think that's the important thing, is that we need to, in today's climate, build diversity and reduce risk by putting in law-level controls. And that's some of the messaging that we're giving businesses. You diversify your investments. Why would you solely rely on the municipality to provide your stormwater control? Why would you not protect your investment?
I think that's going to wrap up our session for today, so thank you very much for attending. I spoke with Eva, and all of the presentations will be made available on the forum's website in about a week's time. So you'll be able to download and make any notes and use them. So thank you very much for attending and have a great afternoon.
So that's it. Good job, Carrie. How are you doing? Good. How are you?
So then perhaps the coach should work in but perhaps in order to clarify, I'm Gregory. I thought that so I figured I'd just say yeah, just want to say thank you. Thanks. That's fascinating. I'm going to look into the Saskatchewan.
Yeah, did that work? Why is Saskatchewan requires
Yeah, that's pretty staggering.
And you know what's worse?
It's almost like saying,
No, we used to do the. Yeah. Because we're working in the city. But yeah.
What about that?
No, we'll check it.
yeah, I know, so that could be tough.
And then, so you could go by the board to get to, I think, this time of day, parents are recommended.
Yeah, until the first several weeks, you can't turn left.
Oh,
but can I just go right, right, right,
yeah,
all the way down to
yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
yeah. Left on fender. That's easy.
Yeah.
And then we turn in the lane before we get down here.
That's right.
And we don't start to go there. I don't know, so we got there for a moment. I know, she told you great, I get that. And lunch. Yeah. Well, I have other bad tech. Downtown. It's hard to estimate how long this big road will take to us. Oh, City Hall, okay. Can we take, you can just stay with him. Yeah. And then we're going where in City Hall? Like the lower arcade? So downtown. So if you go straight past Broadway, turn left. Oh, okay, left on that. Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah. And then one back. Okay. Okay. And then over to Grove Island. And after Grove Island, I go. Yeah, we were saying that for 9 times by the lot, and just not going to the stations have first yeah, okay. And just really look at the costs. Yeah. Where are you and I speaking? Or no? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think there's a full lane. Okay.
It's like walking through.
Okay. So then you go into the lane and then there's okay.
No, well, there's multiple.
The one on there is like,
I also did.
That is your.
You guys can take these?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Leah. Oh, hi.
How are you guys?
Good, how are you? Good.
So you guys are used.
We're not using that.
You're not using subjections, so then we can just turn it off. For that, no, I haven't done it yet. So, as participants come in, I know I was hoping this was going to be a problem. We're giving them each a little bag, which has a piece of like packed lunch. Just to bring them up because they're going to be gone for 4 hours, and conference standards are at 2 hours. We feed them again. So I'll have a bag for you guys, and then there's the people that are okay, great. And you guys are okay to load up the cars and tell the driver, did you see the driveway? It's pretty small.
We have 2 cars in the driveway and I'm parking.
Okay. Okay, great. So you guys had it, you're all set.
Should we start late?
Yes, sorry. So things ran a little bit late this morning with the keynote. So 15 minutes behind a little bit. So we told the buses we really needed 1:45. I know you guys are going to do presentations, so people won't be here until the earliest 1:30. So we're going to have to make the announcement. All of them are eating their lunch together right now. Like around the match. This is one of the tours that at least they don't have to change together like because there's one that they're going like to a farm, so it's conference attire lend itself to that. So we'll try and get
No.
Oh, I have already have that list. This is because people have been signing up last minute. I got that email from you saying get it, but they were still signing up, so I figured you'll have it. Yeah, behind here. Make them all back. I have brought something. Thank you.
Yeah. I started running to the wire.
I'll give you that. I'm sorry.
I'm like, yeah, next week. Thanks for inviting me to be a part
Yeah, well, we're going to. Ready for our part? Yeah. There's a lot of people on that list. I was just okay.
of it. There's some names crossed out.
Yeah, because that was more than, more. I'd say like 13, 14. Yeah. So you guys can have 3 each 9. I can only take 3.
We need to take 4 for a month.
You guys can take 4. Yeah. Preferably. Yeah. Yeah, 12. Yeah, 12 to 15, right? Yeah.
A bit of scary actually because ECIT is boring. I need to do some testing.
No.
Yeah. We got a lot of activities together. I was just a little.
That was the charge that was there.
Yeah, well, we made a point of saying that if you're going to bring back this start, we're going to spend some time to start it.
Did you have to go with the series?
Yeah, I went to sort of go back there as well. Yeah, when I first, anytime I have something like that, I live so I have something happy to kind of unbother.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it was like they said, I was just going north on. Yeah, it's actually like I got to it by going north on Candy. But yeah, maybe you can get 87 yes. But yeah, basically where I was going. So that's Candy, that's near. So better building there. I was just going that way right after Dunsmuir building first, and now just after just turned right down.
Oh, okay, so you actually keep them near.
The alley next.
You next and
So get there.
yeah, you should be able to yeah. It's that work better over you got here. Yeah.
You also turn on.
Yeah, the ones 11 ones, right?
Yeah. So okay, we did that at Hastings and switched to Mender at Industrials. Mender is okay. Who's leading?
Well, at the start, we're parts of different places.
Yeah.
You can leave.
Fair. I volunteered for the location of the train station. And inside, I think the day the sleep for vehicles is very minor. But there's two spots for heat.
Trying to hard, yeah, most of the spots. Literally, the first spots and other people.
Totally a race.
So it's yeah. So there's two EV spots right there. I think there's more art as well. Yeah. Yeah. It's as soon as you go through
Should we,
yeah.
yeah, I know. There's that really free stuff. This is yours. Holly Vaughn was our interview person that was going to be on it. We meet her in virtual because everybody that we need a fund. Okay. So it's one less. So it's actually, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
And you can take a couple more if you want to.
If there's lingerers, and what's good is that the timing grows, you're not like, you just have 4 buses that just arrive, and people are like, oh. So it might be kind of advantageous to have that as a lady start or a lady first. So we'll see. I'll get them your way. Okay, thanks.
So for the Beach Avenue ones, it's yard. Yeah.
And depending on the timing, people are at small meetings. And if that's the case,
Yeah.
upstairs.
Well, you're going to talk about stuff.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. That's the first site we start on.
And then, the other thing, did you get information about like this?
Yeah, we've been working together. I covered for that. Yeah.
So, right, and that's right.
I just tried to think of this other broader crowd that isn't necessarily already in person.
Not like Canada, province that I used to call it.
Actually, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's very common. Yeah, this is also the city. Yeah, it's just kind of soft about it, isn't it? Or yeah.
Like the nice green.
Yeah. 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 We're a little curious. Herbicide started forecasting on the side of the car.
Yeah. Hey, we're gonna be breaking fun already.
Well, mine started.
What do you think of somewhere? Okay. Really one of the words that coaches often like try to get back on transit. Well, you just walk a little bit more than what you're doing, you just don't be somewhere you're just thinking.
Which
Well, West Coast is across you can also take this back.
Yeah, that would be great.
Well, before you go coaching, so I have to be there after like so I have to be there.
Really nice.
Hey, man. I don't know how soccer on tonight, because there's this week because we're cup playing. They moved their practice, so practice when we came on Sunday, there's a practice night, that's also the one on night. You know, flipping with everything going on in the house and doing everything. Usually basketball nights is not a problem. And I'm not sure if you're going to agree that. Nobody wants to 5-year-old that. She's always water. So you take your week to she does love it. I find out that she's really interesting that numbers for but no, it's just we're talking and breaking. Yeah, better. I think the filters are better by not saying half and half.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little more about the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just in my way, so I was like, oh, here, yeah. Of course, there Oh, really? I see a lot of damage Oh, traffic.
That's his question.
Yeah, so now we're trying to get some. You guys gave us that wonderful piece of law. But anyhow, so what exactly are you looking for? In terms of what you guys
Good afternoon, everybody. We'll get started now. Seems like everyone here is going to be here. This is the electric vehicle charging station. You're in the right place. My name is Michael Legg. I'm one of the co-organizers of this tour, and I'm really excited for this tour today because there's a lot of really interesting things happening in Vancouver and in this region. may not have as many electric vehicles as some of the global leaders. It's not Berlin or Los Angeles, but there's been a really thoughtful process going on here on the policy side, on building codes and standards side, technology side, in place. And really prepare the region for this trend that's growing to be more and more important. So we organize, I think, what we see really interesting stops for today. We have diverse speakers from different backgrounds, different organizations to talk to you about what's happening. And I'm actually to start by introducing ourselves a bit. The speakers and riders that we have today, and also it'd be great if we just do a quick round and for the participants to say your name, where you're from, and why you're interested in going to learn. So I'll start with myself. Again, my name is Michael Lang. I'm a small company called Blue Sea Ventures. I'm an energy and greenhouse gas emission consultant for cities. Here's Charlotte Arden.
Thanks. Charlotte Arden, so I work with the Fraser Basin Council because I'm changing our quality program. And we've been involved in electric vehicle, bringing in electric vehicle infrastructure through one of the incentive programs as well as through fleet programs for the last year or others. I'll be a driver as well.
Okay, and we have your quality planners and measurement group. All women drivers, I work on air quality, climate change, and
I'm Jeff Turner. I'm an engineer at PowerTech Labs, just a subsidiary of Hydro. As all the other drivers, my group at PowerTech, use those charging stations and things. Our great integration and
I'm going to say down the district in North Vancouver. Overseeing our sustainability project, I'm not a driver. But we're very interested in electric vehicles in the district. So one of the things I want to come today is take some pictures, looking at sort of the installations and how they sit and how Vancouver put it in as we're helping the town centers to look at it from the urban planning side as well.
Hi, my name is Mustafa. I'm an engineer and PhD graduate in this area, and I'm interested in this workshop. Maybe because it's an interesting topic, and maybe one day I'm going to want to come to know. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Jim Andrews. I'm with the City of Edmonton Office of Environment. I lead the city's development and energy transition strategy, and of course, energy efficiency is part of that strategy. So I'm really interested in working with you guys.
Hi everyone, my name is Lida. I used to work at Sustainable Development Technology Canada, SDTC, which funds tech companies. Since the last couple of months, I've been an independent consultant in the same field. The reason why I'm interested in this is I used to live in Europe for a few years, and I recently did my own almost trade mission to California, and I just wanted to see what the scene was like here, and I'm going to
well, I'm Nancy Hackett from the City Regulator, and I work there in environmental services, so we have condition planning, we have gas planning, and environmental sustainability. And we previously had an electric department, and we previously had a manager who was very big on electric vehicles and really pushed the city to acquire some electric vehicles for to be complete and to begin to understand what it would take to put the infrastructure into Red Deer. He went on to a different job, and the new guy and it is a tough topic in Alberta, it's oil and gas industry, but I still think it's important to understand the infrastructure that's required, and I just was telling Mustafa that I read that they're delivering maybe today, so I was interested to find out what I just got into, and I know they're not hybrids, but your personal and professional.
Good. Chris Walden from the City of Vaughan. So we have a community sustainability by master plan in the city. We just came out last week at council approval for community climate change mitigation plan, and part of that strategy has EV pieces in it. We also had a bit of success with getting EVs into the culture of the organization. In the sense we had, because we're partners with our owners, basically with the city, is owners of our LPC out of Power Street. They offered us EVs at a very discounted rate last year through this end week. And so 5 employees bought this end at a very discounted rate. We were able to put infrastructure at City Hall to help support that.
learn more about how we do this work. Well, John Holmer, I'm with the City of Medicine Hats in Southern Alberta. We've wanted to gather pretty much here. Probably one of the big reasons is we are known as Canada's healthiest cities. That's not even that way, but I'm on the land development side, building new subdivisions. So our department's always trying to push something new into our new communities. And I'm toying with this idea of our next subdivision, maybe dumping in a charging station somewhere. I don't even know if I've seen one tested in the community. And we have 0 charging stations that I know of. So it would be another one for us that we want to be leaders in a lot of stuff, and sometimes first in the world, first in the area doing stuff. So us as a developer, just dumping it in on our own. I mean, charging station, achieve that. Plus, I'm a kind of a car guy, so this is personal side.
So what area are you using?
Medicine Hat, Southern Alberta.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. A few more things before we get into legislative. First, Charlotte's going to give an overview of what's happening in BC, some of the big programs that have been driving the deployment of electric vehicle charging stations. Then I'll go over a few logistics and housekeeping, and then we'll be on the way. So I'll turn it over to Charlotte for an overview of BC electric vehicle policy.
Okay, thanks. I'll try to not be too long because I know we want to get into the cars, but thanks for coming out here. For those of you not in the area, you may not be fully aware of the context of BC and the charging infrastructure right now, so I'll just take you through an overview of what's happened in the last few years around electric vehicles and the supporting infrastructure, and then we can be on our way to hear more details as we go to the different stops. So right now, BC is in a position where we're quite highly supportive of electric cars. Compared to the other jurisdictions in Canada, we have the highest amount of infrastructure, so that's the most amount of charging within residential and public stations. And then for the cars themselves, we're also quite high, even though our population is lower. Our per capita car sales for electric vehicles is quite high as well. So we've been kind of playing catch up with Quebec, so it's a much higher. So it's always fun to make those kind of competitions. Sorry, just to are you guys okay? Should I be waiting? Or?
Pretty sure that we're getting her.
So, working film state?
Yeah, so just these guys are with Metro Vancouver, and it's so just for the regional district. Going to be shots is filming the charging site, so they wanted just as well as mine. I'm just going to make sure that I don't have to repeat myself.
Metro Vancouver does a little program, the Sustainable Region, that our money issues are like.
Yeah, it's called the Sustainable Region, and it's on Shaw. I think it's also on Knowledge, or previously, and it's also online. And all Metro Vancouver videos remain online at metrovancouver.org, and they do videos about a wide variety of subjects, parks to wastewater to water to regional incentives and regional programs. And we're shooting this for a program called Metro Vancouver Close-Up, which is a whole series of one-night stories about sustainability in Metro Vancouver.
So if anyone doesn't want a face to hear, just let them know we're standing in the camera.
We are good, you're on.
Okay. Do you want me to repeat?
It would be fantastic. Just do the well and then go on. Go ahead.
Do the well. I think you were about the what thing so this that was
okay. Well, okay. Just not trying to do too much, but thanks again for coming out here. So today we're going to be looking at the different infrastructure that's been installed, and BC in the Canadian context is one of the leading provinces in terms of supporting electric vehicles and infrastructure. So for both public and residential stations, we are leading the country, and for electric vehicle sales, we're on par with top number 1 or number 2 for per capita sales. So right now, BC is doing quite well, and I guess the conversation today and the tour we're going to have is talk about how this is a coincidence. There's been a lot of different people and partners and investments and organizations who have been part of this build-up and supportive of electric charging stations. One of the differences between BC and other jurisdictions in Canada is really the collaborative partnerships that have happened. And there's, of course, when you're bringing in a new technology, you're going to have a lot of different stakeholders. And when it comes to electric vehicles, you have BC Hydro, the utilities, now suddenly fuel supplier, you have the EV owners that are driving cars to be supported with the charging stations. We have different businesses who might be hosting stations in the parking lot. Municipalities who are trying to define projects to know where these stations should go. So BC has been quite involved in getting more collaboration going, and that started back in 2007, so before these cars were even available for purchase. And the province of BC and BC Hydro co-chaired a multi-stakeholder working group, and that's called Plug-in BC. And leading from that, a couple of years ago, the Clean Energy Vehicle Program came out. And that's an incentive program that's helped a lot of aspects of the different charging infrastructure, as well as academic research, as well as incentives for the cars themselves. So, because we're going to be looking at the infrastructure, I'll just quickly go through the different charging infrastructure incentives that were out there, to give you an idea of why these stations are there, and then when we see the stations themselves, we'll be meeting and hearing from people who are involved in those projects. And we're going to be staying in Vancouver, but in different contexts, this is happening across BC as well. So for charging infrastructure, there were four different incentive programs. For residential, there was the Live Smart incentive. So for anyone who purchased a car, they could get a rebate of $500 and build the infrastructure at their home, for place of residence. Of course, not everyone has their own garage. A lot of people live in multi-unit residentials where you're dealing with the building manager. So another program that is in place right now is run by Home BC, and that's they're getting 125 stations into these multi-units. So our first step is going to be on one of those. Another project is the DC fast chargers, and those are the stations that a car can plug in and you get topped up in 20 minutes to 30 minutes. So these are much more expensive, so harder to put in. And BC Hydro has been leading this project, and we have 6 installed right now and 7 on their way, so 13 in all. But the ultimate plan is to have 30, but that will be for another few years. And then for the public side, public station side, there's the Community Charging Infrastructure Fund, which Fraser Basin Council ran or administered. And that one had 2 components. One was for planning for municipalities and regional districts to go through a planning process to figure out where they should be putting the stations. And then the other component was to actually give businesses and organizations funding to install, purchase and install stations. And in parallel to this, the City of Vancouver was doing the same thing and as a parallel program. So from all those public stations, there are 460-ish stations out there right now. So I think I'll leave it at that. You're going to hear more about the different projects from other people here, and we're going to be meeting people along the way. So I guess the logistics is we have 4 cars. We don't have as many people here that we expected, so we'll have all the space to put in cars. I don't know how we want to divide people up.
I thought it would be fun to keep you on your toes to do the assignment, and that's, so we have 5 legs of our journey. Your assignment is you have to drive to different drivers for the afternoon. So, yeah, that's Charlotte, myself, Eve, and Jeff, the 4 drivers. Jeff, did you bring the test on Model S?
I'm afraid I forgot it.
Oh. This is like the Volkswagen Beetle, electric vehicles. It's every person's car. So there are 3 of those to choose from. What color is yours?
Mine's white.
So we've got white, red, and black on these. So full spectrum there. And then Eve has a Chevrolet Bolt. We got a car of Jay Leno and Barack Obama. So, anyways, we'll yeah. Let's see, I mean, there's 7 participants, 4 drivers. So, anyways, there's plenty of space. So you can choose your car to start out with. So we're making 4 stops. First, we're going to the multi-unit residential, which is a commercial complex, but funded through the multi-unit program. After that, we're going to City Hall, which is an interesting station. After that, we're going to Granville Island. And then we'll end up the day, time permitting, hopefully, each avenue. There's new stations that the partnership between the City of Vancouver, TELUS, and BC Hydro. We have cell towers and e-charging stations combined. So that's it there. There'll be a chance for a washroom breakout in Canada. So that's 1, 2, 3 stops. You can also take a washroom right now, which will cut out. So let's leave here in 5 minutes. We'll have a washroom now, and then we'll have the cars from there.
That would just let you know, we'll be filming the cars in motion, getting folks getting in the cars, getting out.
We're all around the subjects, we're around that.
Yeah. So we need to be neighbors now.
No,
Oh, John, so you mentioned that.
Yes.
Great city. Great city.
It's okay.
Yeah. It's one of those places like it, that unless you have reason to go there, you never go there in my life. Very true medicine. And I've never been there in my life. So now I spent half my life driving.
Right.
And
Yeah.
So if I'm sure and most people won't even get off Cedar Valley or downtown and down Clancy. It's pretty beautiful. It is a beautiful place.
Yeah.
How far out to be at?
I'm committed to that spot. Yeah. It could be, yeah. You're from the city of
One.
Okay. There was one in person. One. It's not supposed to be that. So the city is like in a good way?
Yeah.
Okay, I've heard about it.
So
your counterpart commitment to the basically like Cubby or
we don't really have any really, because most municipalities don't develop lots themselves. We're the actual developer.
yeah. Well, listen, we do a little bit.
Yeah.
We used to do a bunch, years and years
Yeah.
ago with no woods and some of the big subdivisions. Now look at this, and now we're having Blanchard, right, city center right at Fort.
Yeah, yeah. You go to a few of those national ones that have.
Yeah. But I like that model myself. I prefer to have developers run the work.
We were there because the private sector went bankrupt and there was no competition, there was no law. And we were still there because this is
Yeah.
So there is this sort of share for a lot of keep the prices there.
Then you actually do the planning in your neighborhoods or as well. That's really great.
So my job is to, I'm responsible for planning.
Search the conceptual design part as well and write up the concept. That's very hard. Really?
Sure. Yeah, and then our city plan department is only. So we don't get any.
Is that one car, 2 people, anyone else that come?
Sure.
Yep. All right. I'm taking it. 2 minutes.
Got it.
Okay, I'm right with you.
Okay. Good.
Well, yeah, you should come with me and
Yeah,
sure.
So, yeah, 3 people left or come back. Good, it's all interesting.
So it's just
And it's great. Yeah. You're back with the guy.
yeah, everything's for jobs.
Nice. Good place on the planet.
Yeah, it's how long you
Yeah. We always used to come out almost exactly this time. This was sort of a back in the days before kids and before marriage. We come out here to paddle with the spring. This is where you guys get burnt out and it's frozen. Yeah. On the other side of the Rockies, and little kayaks into the more like fun. Yeah, it's got some nice rapids. We think it's like and we get very good look at so and it's good. So and we usually end up with just doing some surfing. Yeah, there's lots of great memories. Oh, April 1st is the best time. My favorite time. Green, it's clean. Water.